Hello, welcome to WRUW FM 91.1 Cleveland. You're currently listening to A Different Drum, where the more you love music, the more music you love. I'm your host, Matt Hook. Today I'm joined by Nik Bärtsch of Nik Bärtsch Ronin. Bärtsch is a pianist and composer who is one of the most unique voices in modern jazz. His music sounds like the love child of George Clinton and Steve Reich, with stunning interlocking rhythms and instruments weaving out of the music, seemingly at will. He is performing with Ronin at the Bop Stop on Sunday, the 28th. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, Matt, great pleasure to be at your show. Looking forward to talk a bit about music and the rest.
And to introduce you to his music, here is Modal 60 off his latest album, A Ways. So that track we just heard was a Modal 60 by Nik Bärtsch Ronin off their latest album, A Ways. That track first appeared off your 2016 album, Continuum. Why did you decide to revamp it this year?
Well, we have two different groups, and the 2016 recording was with Mobile, my acoustic group that plays certain music rituals and has a bit a different setup. And I wanted to show also the continuation in the other band, Ronin, that is an amplified band that attacks a bit more and has a more traditional setup with drums, bass, piano, and reeds. And I wanted just to show how we interpret this piece with Ronin, because my music works with musical modules, so you can also change the setup and play the pieces in different bands, and they have their individual way of showing the content of the piece.
Gotcha. So why do you call your music with mobile rituals?
Well, Mobile is a band that with which I started the whole thing, and that in the beginning played really long music rituals. We wanted to go back to the roots musically, but also socially, and offer music rituals that had an endurance of several hours, sometimes even days, to really focus on the music and to work with that music in a pattern way, so that we could really expand and creating some music rituals in interesting setups where we also invited guests like visual artists or sword fighters. And with that beginning, we opened the whole aesthetics that was starting in 1998. And with these music rituals, we started to develop this idea of a social groove-based community music, and that's why I call it ritual groove music.
So there's a big emphasis on getting guest artists, and is there a lot of crowd interaction with those long-form, multi-hour rituals?
Well, it was an offer that you could stay just a few minutes, or also the whole 36 hours. For example, in the longest rituals, it was not an avant-gardistic pack, but a kind of community offer to really join the music, be there, stay focused, and even sleep there if you would, if you wanted to. For example, parts of the night or so, or return several times. So the interaction was more in the sense of that the whole space invited the community to join, and of course also in between to have talks and to get together. But the music was constantly running, and we were always playing as a quartet, but sometimes having also trios, duos, or even solos in a circle of sand in the middle of the space.
Oh my God. And where was this at your club in Zurich, Exile? Or was this before?
No, that was actually before I founded that club. That was in the very beginning, the year 2000. We rented an old beer brewery and created there this music ritual and community space. But then from 2004 on, I rented an underground club in Zurich. I rented a Monday, and there we started a Monday series to meet every week. And then after a few years, in 2009, I decided with a few friends to create an own club. That's how the Exile came. And since then we play there every Monday, every week. Actually, we have 52 shows a year on the Monday. And when we are on tour, we present a younger band that we support and think it fits to our community.
I know for this last album, Ways, you trimmed Ronan from a quintet to a quartet. Why'd you do that, and what are
Right.
some of the advantages of having a smaller lineup?
Well, Ronin in the beginning was a trio, but then with Andy Pupato and later Shaw, the young reeds player, we created a really strong kind of ancient animal that had a big power, and we had a lot of tours with that quintet, and we created a really a strong and powerful organism, but we lost a bit the original flexibility and improvisation skills that we had as a trio. As you know, the more people are playing together, the more it's also important to work on the instrumentation and the coherent setting you're working with. So we were always talking about how can we get back this flexibility as a trio, this interaction, this interplay, also on a micro phrasing level. And after a while, we just decided that we wanted to bit clear up the percussion level, that we have more space also for the drummer, Casper Rast, with whom I play since over 33 years. And we wanted to have back this flexibility, and that's why we reduced one percussion voice, and we're now working as a quartet to work on the new program. And still there as a quartet, we want to come back to this flexibility that a trio usually has, and that is on a good way, and we're enjoying this new freedom very much.
Is most of the music on a Ways through composed, or is it mainly improvised?
Well, I usually write pieces that have a clear coherence and one basic idea. So you can play the piece actually how it is written. Very often, many pages also with outwritten drum beats, bass lines, like a traditional classical composition. But since we work as a band so often and so intense, of course, we can change the pieces, and the people, my colleagues, they know the music so well that we work a lot with instant composed material and with even combinations of pieces. And also the band as a whole develops over the year with certain pieces its own dramaturgies. So it's actually a mixed process that is also not notable. You can actually not write that, what a band can do together when the musicians know each other so well and work every week together. So Ronin as a group gives the compositions really a very individual shape with a history, and we are playing some pieces actually also on this tour already since 15 years, and they develop still very much and can make a very fresh impression, so that some people that actually know the material in the audience often say, is this a new piece, although it's a very old piece.
That's awesome. And all these modules, they're based on like a single or several ostinato phrases, right? It's similar to how like
usually
Steve would structure
it has a basic idea in a module. So it can be 2 cycles of rhythm, for example, a 7 rhythm against a 5 rhythm, like we have it in module 58, a newer piece. But also there is clear harmonic structural harmonic development, and there are often also beat interlockings, rhythm interlockings that just show one basic idea. And we try to explore this idea in these pieces as an interpreting organism, but also with some improvisations on the micro or ghost note level. But usually I write a piece also dramaturgically through, so that it makes sense as a whole. So it's not just a combination of a few phrases, but it's usually exploring one major idea in a piece. But as I said, and like you asked, the piece can over the years develop and go in totally different directions.
Gotcha. And I know Ways features the first song on any of your projects written by someone not named Nik Bärtsch, by Reed's player Shaw. Why did you decide to include it?
Well, Shaw already in the very beginning was a very talented composer, and he came to me when he was 18 and wanted to study composition, and we were sitting actually a few minutes on the table, and then I realized it's much cooler to play together, and to get this pragmatic, direct strong feeling of touring and exploring your material as a player, but also as a composer in front of an audience. And that's how we started to play together. And over the years, we played in Ronin only my material, but he was constantly composing. And for the new program, I thought it would be great to also give him a space and a chance to show how much he has developed as a player, but also that people get attention for his composition skills and maybe his other bands and pieces, because Shaw is an extraordinary player, especially on the bass clarinet, where he has developed kind of an individual beatboxing technique on the bass clarinet. And I just also wanted to open that space to give him the room that he deserves as a personality.
That's awesome. And you mentioned that you started playing with Shaw when he was 16. How did you guys first meet?
Well, he was always interested in that music also as a young player, and he came always to the shows. And when I started this Monday series, he was there every Monday, was playing with us, and it was totally organic and naturally clear for me that he has to be part of the group, and he also wanted that, and everybody respected him very much. So it was the thing that we know from this unacademic world, the real music jungle, that you meet the people, they have personalities, they have affinities, and over the years you grow together. And that's the beautiful thing in music, that this still happens by through the jam sessions, through the way just where people get magnetically drawn to in the music scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very music, especially improvisation, can be such a great spiritual experience.
Exactly.
Sure. And I know in 2003, sorry to change the subject, you lived in Japan for half a year. Why did you move to the country?
Well, I had already as a teenager a lot of affinities, like the movies, the ancient ones, Kurosawa's samurai movies, but also the modern and bizarre Japanese movies and mangas, but also the tradition of the arts in Zen, and this handcraft spirit. And so in the beginning, of course, I was just reading and listening and watching everything, and it was a country far away. But then I needed a reality check of my affinities and wanted to go to Japan to check out the things I was interested directly there. And so I got a little support, because as a young musician, I got a prize from the city of Zurich. And with that money, I decided to go to Japan for half a year and to study there martial arts. I'm doing Aikido, but also studying music traditions, the old traditions of Gogoku and the Noh theater and the drumming, but also modern phenomena of Japanese music. And also visiting several places, and I was in a Zen monastery there in Kyoto, just to check what's the real feeling. Has it something to do with me, or was everything just kind of a dream? And that really inspired me a lot, and I learned a lot also being away from your home and seeing your own country, very different, your own aesthetics, your own history. That was a very important step for me to develop, to grow, and also to clear my own views on my own music.
And you said you stayed at a Zen monastery. What was that experience like?
Well, first of all, it was also a reality check in many positive ways. For example, the soundscapes you experience there when you're meditating in these half-open halls with the percussion of the Zen tradition, with the wood blocks and drums and bells, but also with the ravens, the water and the wind and the chanting was very impressive. It's kind of a sound installation. And it's very real there because they just do it. But on the other hand, it's also a religious tradition, and it's very structural and also, in a way, very conservative. That was for me also an interesting experience, because I'm more interested in the practical technique of Zen meditation and of the experimental potential and its funny, ironic way of writing and talking. And so for me, it was a very inspiring thing to also find a bit my own way of interpreting this tradition and of learning to develop that.
That's beautiful. And is that where you came up with this concept of Zen funk?
No, that was much earlier. I mean, funk was always a thing I was totally attracted to, the grooves, the interlockings of the rhythm, the community thing, taking time to establish a groove, and also these beat balances based on the rhythm section of drums and bass, and the whole pattern work. And my mother introduced me actually to Zen meditation when I was a teenager, so I had this kind of affinity to empty spaces and the beauty of nothingness, but on the other hand, a strong rhythm and sensual flow in music. And I wanted to combine that. I needed that to have my own soundscape in my life. And I didn't find that actually somewhere else. I found a lot of things in funk, of course. And in traditional or ritual music all over the world, but no combinations. So I already started very early to combine that, but finally, of course, through the travel to Japan and all my experiences, it deepened this idea and showed me also that's the right way. That's a thing to explore. We can learn a lot, me as a composer, as a player, but also together as a group.
And what funk artists specifically influenced you?
Well, there are many, of course, of the great tradition, but what I loved very often were the bands. For example, the Meters that had a certain way of almost instrumental interlocking music. And of course, also the traditional people like James Brown with a certain way of using the drums. But also the great entertainers like Prince, where I studied a lot of all these after-show concerts where he really let the music flow and the grooves, very different to the pop aesthetics he had often in the main shows. And that inspired me a lot, how disciplined they were, but also how they improvised and were working with phrasing and stops and kind of more in this ritual funk way. That I listened for a while every day almost, and studied all the bootleg videos when I was in my beginning of my 20s.
And of course, as far as playing with getting the audience involved and making the concert almost a spiritual experience, you can't really... It's hard to beat Prince in that regard as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you have to find your own way, and you can listen and be inspired by a lot of great artists and especially great bands and ways how they work together. But you find that in many groups. Also, for example, a very important record for me is Amen by Salif Keita, that was produced by Joe Zawinul, where you also have these interlocking rhythms and almost improvised but very coherent ways of playing together in a very spiritual funk sense. And I tried just to develop my own interpretation together with my colleagues of this community playing, constant playing and inspiring each other, but also finding my own aesthetics with all my influences in music, from classical chamber music, minimalism, funk, but also, of course, jazz as a huge tradition of treating material freely and with a high consciousness for a coherent dramaturgy in a piece.
And I was wondering, how did you get started in music? And when did you decide to become a professional?
That happened very naturally. I don't remember that there was an initial experience. It was like more... I wanted to start with drumming when I was a kid already, with 7 years. And in that time in music school, the teacher told my mother, drums is not an instrument for a kid. You couldn't actually study drums in the music education for kids. So my mother luckily took me serious and was looking for a teacher, and so that's how I started with drumming. And 2 years later, the same happened actually with piano. I saw a young kid playing some boogie woogie, and I wanted to learn that. And also this music, you could not study in the official music school in the end of the 70s in Switzerland. So my mother had to look for a private teacher, and she supported me very much in just my will and wish to play this music, and that's how I started. And everything else developed very naturally. I was exploring first boogie woogie, blues, jazz, Brazilian music, and then Gershwin, Bartok, and then it went into modern and traditional classical music, to minimalism, to Steve Coleman and funk. And so everything developed actually very naturally, also with different traditions, European traditions, Swiss drumming traditions and things like that. And I already earned money with playing music with 10 years, so I never decided to become a musician. Everything happened naturally.
Gotcha. Just flowed very quickly. And I'm wondering, why do you think spirituality, because I've noticed you've talked a lot about that, why do you think that's an important thing to have in music?
Well, I think spirituality means, first of all, community. It means a concert is a thing that you share and you do together, the audience with the players, the band, all together, the organizers. It's a special event where you share common energies, where you want to explore something together, and where you also want to somehow ensure together we are all together here on the right spot, sharing something. And that creates togetherness. That is, for me, spiritual. That means we can do things together, we can change things together, and we also want to really emphasize this togetherness, not war and being against each other, but sharing things, partnership, and having for that a ritualistic setup, which is a concert is. And of course, this needs daily training and working on that spirit to enjoy life, but with a high consciousness, not an esoteric kind of, everybody loves each other, but with a higher spirit for culture, community, and creating great art experiences together. That's for me spiritual, and music is the best direct power for that.
Especially as traditional spiritual institutions are kind of losing a lot of their popularity, music can kind of step in and fill that void for a lot of people too, I think.
Yeah, true.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was great to have you. We're going to be playing, again, this is Nik Bärtsch. Nik Bärtsch and his band, The Ronin, are going to be playing at the Bop Stop on Sunday, the 28th. Thank you so much for coming on. Anything you'd like to say to our listeners?
Well, it was a great pleasure to talk to you, Matt, and thanks a lot for the interest. And we are really happy to be the first time in Cleveland, and that's special that we also can share our music in the United States and play at so many interesting places. And I look very much forward to meet all the people there and to get in contact and also exchange ideas. So great pleasure. Thanks for the chance to be on your show and to speak a bit about our music.
Thank you so much. I'm honored that I'm the first Cleveland publication to be talking to you, for sure. And is this your first time in Cleveland?
Yeah, that's the first time. It's really an honor for me to be on your show and to have a chance to, show our things and get in contact with everybody. We are looking very much forward to be in contact and to share our ideas with you all.
All right, great. Again, thank you so much for coming on the show, Nik. If you want to see him, he'll be at the Bop Stop Sunday, the 28th, and stay tuned for more music.
Thanks a lot, Matt.